Listeners, welcome back to the next episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to have Lizzie Mulherin here today. Lizzie, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, yeah. Lizzie's joining us all the way from down under today, which is cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lizzie, as we start off these episodes, I always like to just ask people to tell our listeners and our watchers a little bit about themselves. So, tell me about yourself. Where are you from? Your family, your hobbies, your work, all that sort of stuff.
Sure. So, my name is Lizzie. I'm 34 and I'm currently in Sydney, Australia, but I actually grew up in Brisbane, which is about an hour's flight north of where I am now. And I have always loved traveling. I have lived in, I think it's 6 cities in 4 countries in the last 10 years.
Wow.
So, I've been all over the place. I left Brisbane. My first stint was an exchange in California. Then I came back, finished my degrees, moved to London, a couple of years there. Then I moved to Amsterdam. Then came back to Australia after some travel in South America.
Wow.
So I've been all over the place, and in that time, I've sort of done a few different jobs as well, sort of under the advertising, marketing, PR, journalism umbrella.
Mm,
But have for the last 5 years, I've been working for myself as a freelance copywriter and brand strategist, and loving that.
mm.
And yeah, I've just recently joined Substack as well.
Cool, and you're very welcome.
Yeah.
And in terms of all the places you've been to, Lizzie, where's been your
Yeah.
favorite city that you've lived in so far?
Oh, okay. That's such a good question. It's so hard. I loved my time in London. I think because I was also 24, and that's just like such a great age to just be doing whatever you want. Like it was this perfect sort of time in my life where I was like, I can't really put a foot wrong. I can try whatever I want, and there's no going wrong at that point. And I think there's something also really liberating about living overseas, because no matter what happens in the absolute quote unquote worst case scenario, you can always just go home. So living overseas always just felt like a bonus life to me. And London was my first sort of real life that I set up on my own away from home. So that'll always have a little special place. But in terms of where I've traveled to, I think the most memorable trip would be doing Mount Everest base camp a few
Wow.
years back. That was pretty cool. Yeah.
Cool. How was that? Was
Yeah,
it awesome? Yeah.
it was amazing. Yeah. It was also the first, like, hilariously, the first proper hike I'd ever done. I just really threw myself in the deep end.
You really did.
But yeah, I really did. But no, I loved it. Like the scenery was just incredible. My phone was dead off, like in my bag for 2 weeks straight,
Wow.
which was amazing. I think that was like one of my favorite parts about it, just being so present. But yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. I'll definitely recommend
That's
it.
very cool. I'd love to try that someday myself.
Yeah.
It's one of these things where I keep talking about it. My wife is always like, "You're not gonna climb Everest. You're not gonna climb Everest," and I'm
Oh,
like,
really?
"Well, we'll see." You're like, "Probably
Yeah, you
not though."
should do it.
But
I think it's like maybe easier than people think if you just take it slow and you're with the right like tour company and whatever, if you're with the right people.
yeah,
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
maybe some of the bucket list maybe someday.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, Lizzie, you've traveled extensively during your time as a writer. How has that travel shaped your approach and your attitude to your work?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, as I was coming out of school and through university, there were only two things that I was sure of wanting to do, and that was traveling and writing. So I just really made those my priorities through my whole 20s, and definitely never looked back, because I always had the opinion that the more life I lived and the more things I had experienced, the better writer I would be.
Hmm.
And I'd say that that's definitely sort of paid off and definitely proven to be the case. Like I definitely haven't had a linear trajectory to like where I am now. It's been so many detours and ups and downs and like, all over the place. But I think, yeah, like in all of those countries that I mentioned earlier, all the places I lived, I had different jobs as well. So I was like working in a PR agency in London, like a big fancy PR agency, but I really missed writing. So I took my first sort of leap of faith over there and went out freelance and did that from Amsterdam, did some travel writing from there, and then learned a lot because I had no idea how to manage the business side of freelance writing. I didn't know how to
Hmm.
package my services or, price myself properly. I had no idea. So I burnt out quite quickly, came back to Australia, then worked in a global marketing team in-house. And then a few years later, I was like, no, I really need to write. So that was at the end of 2019. And
Mm.
I think, now the business that I have and the services that I offer and the way I approach my business is a culmination of all of those experiences I've had and all of the mistakes along the way. And yeah, now I can sort of combine it all into, a nice little service package for my clients.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
I think the whole business side of writing is something that a lot of writers really struggle with.
for
Just
sure.
being able to actually manage it as a business and not just write for the fun of it, but actually be able to make money
Yeah,
from it and structure
for
it in that
sure.
way.
Yeah.
What advice would you give someone who might be interested in doing the same sort of thing you've done? So like traveling and writing about travel and all those different
Yeah.
kind of aspects of it. What advice would you give them?
For sure. I mean, there's a lot of advice I would give, but there's like a few sort of top ones I would say. Um, from I suppose, like mindset perspective, which is so much more important than I realized.
Mm,
But if you've got something niggling inside you to go out on your own and try this, if you want to write for a living, if you want to travel, whatever it is, you have to just go for it,
mm,
because otherwise you'll just live with regret. And that's just the worst. For me, I'm like, I've always made my decisions based on, not wanting to live with regret. So obviously no one can predict the future,
mm,
but if you've got something inside you that you're like, I really want to have a go at this, then you need to have a go at it. And when you do, remember that success, as I said earlier, my journey has been far from linear. So don't expect like this overnight success. Like don't expect that,
mm,
your first hook is going to land, that, that there's not going to be challenges along the way. There will be challenges along the way. If you can manage your expectations around that, I think that really helps you keep going and stay the course, when things do get a bit challenging. But in terms of just like a practical piece of advice, the main thing I say to like my coaching clients is make sure you have, I call them the parachutes in
mm,
place. So if you're jumping out of an airplane, you're not going to do it without like a parachute strapped to your back. And the same goes for, whether you're leaping out of a job full time or whether you're wanting to start something in a side hustle capacity, making sure you've got all your practical ducks in a row. So like that might be, having a certain amount in savings so that you're not really stressing about how you're going to be making money so you
mm,
can survive. Or it might be if you don't want to go fully at it, you might get a job, in a cafe or like driving an Uber or something that can sort of take the pressure off your words while you're in that sort of initial building phase. Because
mm,
what I really learned when I was living in Amsterdam and, trying it for the first time, and I had no idea about the business of writing, I was pricing myself. So I was massively undercharging for my work.
mm,
And as a result, I was just in this dog paddling, having to say yes to things that didn't feel aligned. And I was so stressed doing it all. And that's just like the fast path to burnout. So making sure you have those practical parachutes in place before you sort of start to really go for it is the best way to sort of minimize as much of that stress of self-employment as possible.
mm. How do you actually price yourself as a writer? So how do you decide this is how much my work is worth and this is like
Mm.
a fair price for my clients? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges writers face. And
Mm,
honestly, still to this day, if I'm quoting a job that is, it's like that new level, new devil. If I'm quoting a client now that's, I've worked with a few really high end clients now, they've got big budgets, and even still, I'll send an email and I'm like, oh my God, did I just, like, did I start that? But I think it's a case of, building up to what you're confident with and what you're comfortable with. Again, because there's so much psychology in pricing. If you go in with a number that's like way too high and then you're stressed about not going to be able to deliver and you're like losing sleep, then that's not a good time for anyone. But if you
mm,
go in way too low, then you're resentful of the client because they're taking more time than you're getting paid for.
mm,
But there are actually online, if you actually just Google, copywriter rates, there are resources available that give you a fair idea of the market average, like the market standard, a range based on like a daily rate, an hourly rate. If you're doing like blogs, they cost up just a few of the key items based on your experience level. And those, I always refer those, in my courses because those are just a great little starting point.
mm,
But definitely don't sort of limit yourself to those as well. I know copywriters that charge much more and they get paid and the client's really happy because they get a really high quality of work. So it's
mm,
definitely a challenging thing, but I find those sort of templates are a good place to start.
mm. That's really great advice, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
And just coming back to travel writing again, so a couple of
Mm.
questions. First of all, um, what exactly does travel writing involve? I know it sounds like an obvious question, but if you're a travel writer and you're moving
Mhm.
around the place,
Mm,
What kind of content are you creating for that? Is it work for other clients, or is it work for a
mm.
blog, or what does that look like for you?
For sure. So it can totally vary. And over the years, it has looked like so many different iterations to me. Um, so I'll give you two sort of examples. So basically, you can either be on a publication side. So, writing for like Time Out, Huffington Post, Australian Traveller, or there's so many. um, where you, as a writer, you have the relationship with the editor, and you might either get pitched to by a tourism board or a hotel or an airline or someone who's looking to promote their experience.
Mm,
They might pitch to the publication, and the publication might send you as a freelancer if they've got a relationship with you, or you might have a relationship with the PR, and they might come to you, and then you pitch the trip to the publication,
mm,
or it can be a case of you're going somewhere yourself and you're looking for an angle yourself. So, like, for example, I'm going to New York in a couple of weeks and I'm putting the feelers out within my network. So, is there anything really cool, any new hotels that have opened up, or any new experiences around that time of year that could make for something that's a really unique, different story?
mm,
And if my PR contacts let me know about that, or if I find something on the ground, then I'm going to pitch to a publication and do
mm,
it that way. So, there's a few ways you can go about that. And it is it's an accumulative thing, once you sort of get your foot in the door and you get your first sort of few runs on the board, start to build those relationships in Australia, and also when I was living in London, like it's actually a small industry, the travel writing industry, like it's pretty niche. So once you sort of start to go on a few trips and get to know a few PRs, if you go to a couple of networking events or join some, community groups, you will start to get to know those people, and those you might be surprised by how many opportunities there actually are, because tourism is back booming now after COVID. It's like really flying. So there are a lot of opportunities out there. So that's the publication editorial side.
mm,
From a brand business side, so that trip I just mentioned earlier where I went to Everest Base Camp,
mm,
I actually did that with Intrepid Travel. They're an Australian started business that's now doing really well. I worked in-house for them on their global marketing team. So we had a blog as a business, and we had freelancers that wrote for our blog, which is still standing to this day. So there are also travel companies that have blogs that act in that same editorial capacity that also pay quite well, and they'll send freelancers on their trips as well. So you might be going on behalf of a brand as
mm.
well. So those are the sort of two. There's a few ways that you can do it. Yeah. And once you get a few runs on the board, it's all transferable. If you've got, and even I think a lot of people have questions around how do you start if you have absolutely nothing.
Mm.
Um, you just need one or two, and even, start places like Substack and Medium, or, your own personal blog, like self-publishing, just to demonstrate your writing ability. They just want to know that you can, write well, and pick a good angle. A lot of the times, these travel editors, they'll say what's more important than a really long track record to them is a really strong angle, a really good story. So if you're
Mm.
traveling or you hear of something that sounds super interesting, or it's like something you'd want to read about, or that feels really aligned with the publication, pitch it to the editor, and you just never know where it might lead.
Mm, that's fantastic advice. Yeah, because
Yeah,
people will be listening to this today and thinking, I'd love to be a travel writer. This sounds like a really cool
yeah,
job, and that's
yeah,
really good, solid advice for that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and Lizzie, you're also a photographer, so how have you used your talent with the camera to kind of complement your writing work?
Yeah, that's very kind of you to call me a photographer. I definitely like feel comfortable calling myself a writer, but I do love taking photos, and I definitely offer it, and I do it for businesses. That might just be my own like confidence with that. That's so funny. But yeah, I love taking photos, and I mean, obviously images, we're such humans are such visual creatures, and having really beautiful images to go alongside your articles is such a great way to add depth to your articles, and also it can really make you stand out and sort of more valuable to an editor if you're going to them and say, hey, I've got this really cool idea for a story, also I can provide the visual content for
Mm,
them. They're like amazing, because every article needs images. That's the world we're living in. That's, online, print, whatever it is, like you're going to need images, and if you can provide that and make that really nice and easy for them, give them something that they can share that's super shareable on social, that might help them get clicks, help them get views, because at the end of the day, that is what publications are wanting. They're wanting views, they're wanting clicks, especially if you're looking at digital. So anything that can really help them get that is going to help your case as well.
brilliant, excellent.
Yeah.
I want to pull up a quote here from, I don't know if it's in your Substack or your website, but you
Yeah.
said, I built a multi six-figure business while rarely working more than 20 to 30 hours a week. Tell
Yeah.
me more about that.
Mm. Yeah, it's such a good question. And I speak quite frankly about money, in my Substack and also on my website, on my course, when I'm speaking to my coaching clients or wherever, because for a number of reasons, I think that it's really important to have transparency because, as I mentioned earlier, pricing is something that so many writers like really struggle with
Mm.
from like a self-worth, perspective, but also just not having any idea how much other freelancers are making. Like you ask that question, like how do you even know? Because it's so transparent. And there's no transparency really in the
Mm.
industry unless they're really sort of upfront about it. So I think it's really important to be upfront about that. And also, I think a lot of people think that to make really good money as a writer, you have to either sell out because there's that portrait artist stereotype as well. Like, you're not noble if you're, taking money, you have to sell out or be constantly working, be constantly stressed. And I had all of those experiences. I made all of those mistakes, in my first sort of stint, my first attempt at freelancing when I was back in
Mm.
Amsterdam. And when I went out on my own again, more recently, 5 years ago now, I was like, I just refused to accept that. So, but when I first started my, back in 2019, I left my job at the end of 2019 at that travel company. And, obviously then COVID hit like a few months later, which was great timing. But managed to survive. But even, before that was all happening, my goal for that first year was simply to get by and sustain myself with my words in a way that felt not stressful to me, in a way that was fulfilling. Work-life balance has always been really important. So I was able to do that in that first year. And then after that first year, I was like, okay, now I'm gonna make some money. I'm gonna go for six figures this year. And I don't want to work too much more than I have been. I don't want to be stressed out. I don't want to, I just want to be taking on clients who can pay me more for the same thing I've been doing for these clients that I've been, charging less for. And
Mm.
that's essentially what happened. And I was able to do that like fairly easily, clients that I've been working with and obviously doing a decent job for. I upped my rates with them and they accepted it. And that sort of came without me having to take on any more hours or, and I think the more I'm just really passionate, I guess, about talking to writers about this. I'm like, yes, this is possible. Trust me, this is possible. There are plenty of writers out there making so much money, really, without working crazy hours. And
Mm.
that 20 to 30 hours a week, like it might not sound like that much, but when you think of, a standard, quote unquote, full-time employee who goes into an office, that's the amount of hours that they would actually spend working anyway. When
Mm.
between like the water cooler chats and the coffee and the meetings and all the time that's wasted in offices, like it ends up being no, really not much more than that people are actually working. So it's just about making those hours really count, being really focused on what you're doing.
Mm.
And again, really charging the right of value for the work that you're producing.
Yep. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I think that's a massive challenge for writers today
Yeah.
is just their own self-worth and in a monetary sense as well. Um,
Yeah.
what other challenges do you think are facing most writers right now?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say AI is obviously the big bad wolf that
Mm.
people are very scared of, and understandably so. I don't know about you, but when ChatGPT first came out, I was like, it was going through all the stages of grief, like denial, anger, like whatever. And then I landed on acceptance.
Mm.
And I have since, embraced it in my work and I've built it into my service offering. I've got a new website launching like next week, and I'm, listing it as like I can AI editing, AI prompting. It's part of what I can do. I have not, to my knowledge, yet lost a client to AI.
Mm.
And it's really interesting in terms of what's actually sort of happening out there in the field. There's a real mix of, I've had some clients that have said they've hired me exclusively to work with AI and to just use AI to write, to pump out, articles a lot quicker and then essentially take on more of an editor role,
Mm.
because it definitely still needs, editing. And then I have other clients who are specifically still like no AI, like they're very against it, which is interesting. I'm like,
Mm.
good luck. I'm like going to be critical and that. But yeah, it's quite interesting. I think, human nature, some people are super excited about AI and they're like, bring it in, let's get it on board. But some are still very reluctant, very resistant to that change, especially in the travel writing industry. there's a lot of pressure to not misrepresent a location or misrepresent an experience. So if
Mm.
that's not actually coming from a human sort of authentic place, then they could actually get in real trouble. So that's, that's a really thing to be sort of careful of.
Mm.
But yeah, I always say to anyone who's concerned about that, that just to use it, embrace it. Like, as a writer, you're actually, an amazing position to make the most out of AI more than anyone, because as a
Mm.
writer, you instinctively know what makes something a strong and compelling piece of work. What a key message is, what tone of voice is, and all of the things that most people who are trying to use AI and take the shortcut with it, they don't know. So they're not going
Mm.
to be confident as well. So the quality of work that they're going to be getting isn't going to be as high. And also because most writers have really perfectionistic standards, we also edit it to be up here. Whereas, the business owners who are just like, whatever, I'll let go of a writer and I'll just use AI, it's really going to show in their
Mm.
content. It's all going to be so generic. So I think there's still a really golden opportunity to be that, like that extra 10% that's going
Mm.
to really stand out. But people who have been writing professionally, or even as a quote unquote hobby, if that's what you feel more comfortable calling it, I bet that like you're going to be much more stronger at using AI and getting the most out of it than other writers. And then there's so many other kinds of writing and client work that's not using it yet at all. So I do really think that embracing it is the key. How do you
Yeah.
feel about AI?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I went through the stages like you did at the start, where initially I was like, "This is incredible. This is amazing. Look what we can do with this." And then I was like, "Oh no, all writers are going to lose their jobs. This is terrible."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah,
after a point, I was like, "Well, actually, I can now see the internet being flooded with AI slop that I have no interest in reading."
yeah,
But I think it I think it just sort of elevates the writers who do write from their own genuine
yeah,
perspective, even if they
yeah,
use it, as you say, to like complement
yeah,
their work and to like give a structure to it and to research and things like that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I think you can really see the difference, as you say, between an
yeah,
article or post that's been written just with purely with ChatGPT with really minimal editing, and one
yeah,
that's been written maybe with AI, but it's been carefully edited and
yeah,
elevated by the writer's
yeah,
own perspective and talent.
yeah.
Um,
Agreed.
yeah, and I think
Yeah,
that's going to happen more and more. I think the cream's going to rise to the top, and all the
yeah,
slop is just going to sink to the bottom. And
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
think if we made that top 10%, as you say, that's a really
yeah.
great place to be. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think there's definitely a real opportunity, and bringing your expertise to what makes the structure of a piece of work good, of what's needed. Because I think you can really start to even tell. I know I can recognize now, like there's like these AI tells, like there's certain words or certain kinds of phrases, like in an ever evolving landscape, and just
yeah,
like really generic stuff like
yeah,
that. That you can that it's just so obvious. Yeah.
yeah. I've
Yeah.
come to really hate the words embrace and weather
Yeah.
since ChatGPT came along, 'cause it seems to be everywhere. They always have the word embrace, or they say like whether
Yeah.
you're such.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're such tells.
100%.
You're right.
Yeah, there are tells. And yeah, when you start to sort of use it, you're like, oh, there she is.
Yeah, that's it. And Lizzie, you joined Substack, obviously. What brought you to the platform, and what do you like about it most?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I love it. I'm so happy to be on it. So I, had actually heard about Substack years ago. When I was still employed that travel company, but wanting to write, I just didn't know how I was going to go about it. Like
Mm.
back in 2018, I think it was launched, and my housemate at the time was like, I've just heard about this platform, you should join it." And I sort of looked at it, I was like, I don't know what to say, and then I just let it go. And then years go by, I've got my business. I looked at it again. I was like, I'm still not quite sure what to say, so I left it. But then in the last sort of 18 months, I've made a course that helps writers go freelance essentially. So it steps them through the business of writing, and it all kind of happened quite organically. I was just basically starting to get people ask me a lot of the same questions. So I was like, would people just be interested if I just like packaged this
Mm.
up? So yeah, it's been like a really cool experience. And with that, I've been emailing them and building a community, which has been a really new and really fun thing for me. And then Substack just felt like the perfect place to build that community and continue that, and also just go and write without like agenda, in terms of not
Mm.
having to do it for a client or an editor or someone else's brief. It's like just coming from me. It's like my musings, my whatever. And I write 2 newsletters a week. One is, a sort of bulletin style snapshot of like job opportunities that are like global freelance job opportunities, and also like quotes. And I have like little themes for each one, and, wins from the community. And that's a really fun sort of way to start the week. And then on Thursdays, I do a more sort of in-depth, it can be either a thought piece on like, or, an anecdotal piece of advice, or, something that I learned in my
Mm.
early years, or responding to a question, whatever it is. It's just kind of open to whatever I sort of feel like. And that just feels so nice for me to have that outlet that
Yeah.
is, just like a pure place to connect with people, I would say.
Mm.
Yeah.
You mentioned the word community there, and a lot of
Mm,
people I've spoken to have talked about community in terms of Substack.
mm,
How
mm,
do you see what was the process of cultivating the community around your publication
mm,
look like for you? So what do you use
mm,
to kind of engage people in your writing and then engage them like
mm.
with each other and within your writing
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah, definitely still something I'm learning, I would say. But even, obviously the comment sections, like having, prompts that encourage people to converse with each other under an article, and or like, share what they think on a piece.
Mm.
And also I've been playing around with like having like polls in there as well, just to sort of get more interaction as well. And I share my articles on my Instagram, and, people can interact with me there. But yeah,
Mm.
I'm excited to, I haven't even sort of played around with the video yet, or any of those
Mm.
platforms, like any of those, functionalities, because they seem to just be bringing in more all the time. But it just feels like a really exciting place to be. And, it's the one platform that I find that you can commit to being consistent on, and
Mm.
then come away still feeling energizing and creative and inspired, rather than, the meta platforms where I just come away feeling drained, and it's like a burden to have to like, oh, I've got to post on Instagram, like, so just like whatever. And then I just like never do. Whereas with Substack, it's just like, as soon as I started, I was like, cool, I'm going to be doing 2 posts a week, 2 articles a week, and showing up on notes every day. And that has
Mm.
felt really easy, because that's like, I enjoy doing it. I enjoy connecting with the people there. I often, like, people who've, new subscribers to me, like, I'll go check out their publication and see what they're about. Like, I love that you can really learn so much about a person on the platform as
Mm.
well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love Substack for that
Yeah.
and notes in particular.
Yeah.
And you mentioned social media and how
Yeah.
you've used that as well.
Yeah.
How does your social setup fit in with everything you're doing? So what does your like ecosystem look like? Do you still use
Mm.
social media heavily for that, or is it kind of moving just more towards Substack now?
Well, it's funny. So Instagram, it's just Instagram. Like, I have a TikTok, but I'm like, I don't need another vortex to fall down. Like, I just like, maybe one day I could like afford to hire someone to do that for me. Like, I just can't be doing that right now. So it's really just Instagram, and I'm super haphazard on Instagram. I just like, that's just my style there. It's whatever. I've just like accepted it. I've gone through things. I'm like, oh, but yeah, Instagram for me has been a really helpful tool as well, in terms of like my travel writing, and because I've
Mm,
got, a personal one, and then I've got like a create your living one, which is more specifically obviously for writers, and then my personal one is also like travel writing and that kind of thing. So it's definitely still a platform with a lot of purpose, and, serves a lot of purpose for me still, but it's definitely a lot more haphazard. And in terms of the create your living one, I literally write on Substack, and then I share. I'm using Instagram to just share, like, that's the ecosystem. I start with Substack now.
mm,
And then I share what I'm writing, in the stories there, or, sometimes, I'll read a quote, or like I'll get a piece of inspiration from Substack that I can share as a different post. But primarily it's now just an extra funnel of my Substack. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's kind of the same for me now. Like I used to be kind of on
Yeah.
every platform and was sharing things all the
Yeah.
time. I'm still
Yeah.
there, but I don't really
Yeah.
use my social media presence in anywhere near as much as I used to. Um,
Yeah.
every so often I kind of have like a bit of a head stagger. I want to go back and try and use them all again and posting things on them,
Yeah.
and then I realize after like a week, this does like so little now in terms of like building my audience and that sort of thing, and
Yeah.
just go back to
So
Substack again. Um,
exactly.
but yeah,
Yeah.
um,
What's your ecosystem like? 'Cause, I mean,
yeah,
like, your publication is just doing so well. And actually, I should tell you, this podcast is like when I was looking at joining Substack, and I was like, how do I even learn how to go about it? And this podcast came up.
Oh, really? Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it came straight up. I
Awesome,
think it
yeah.
was with Maya, like
Yeah.
a little while back. So yeah, that was like the one I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna just get on there. So you're part of the inspiration.
That's cool. That's cool to hear, actually, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, so my ecosystem in terms of socials is really primarily Substack, and then I've actually used TikTok quite a lot recently, but
oh
that's
yeah,
because I'm promoting my book that's coming out
oh
soon.
yeah,
So this one here.
yeah,
And I've basically been trying to connect with other TikTokers there who like to create
yeah,
content, the kind of content that I'm not
yeah.
very good at creating. And then I let them create it for me, and then I'll share it onto Substack or whatever else. So you'll probably see a
Cool,
lot more of like TikTok videos appearing on my notes feed over the next
amazing.
few days and weeks.
Nice.
But it's cool because it basically just creates social proof, it creates content, and it's far
Hmm.
better than what I could ever create. That
Yeah,
fits the platform's kind of style.
yeah.
Um, I used to
That's
use I used to use Twitter a lot more. I used to use LinkedIn. I used to use
mhm.
Instagram a lot more. But
Yeah,
genuinely, the reach is it's just so poor now on a lot of other platforms.
yeah,
There's not really any point.
yeah.
I think as you mentioned, if I had someone who could like kind of handle that for me and would just take
Hmm.
my stuff and just share it across socials, I would do
Hmm.
that.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's still good to have a presence there, but
yeah.
it's really hard to justify spending too much time on social media platforms at the minute because
Yeah,
they're so focused on keeping people within their channels and not letting them go
yeah,
outside it. Um,
exactly.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
one of the only platforms at the minute that I'm kind of trying is Blue Sky a little bit more because
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah,
like olden days Twitter,
yeah,
and they don't suppress links, so there is that
yeah,
opportunity now. If you share, for instance, Substack
yeah.
posts onto there, people will actually see them and be able
It
to
actually
like,
gets seen. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, cool. Yeah, I just find like Instagram is so diluted, now. Even even if you're not trying to share something from a different platform, like at the best for anyone, like it's just so diluted. And everyone's, I
Mhm.
think, quite fatigued. And I think that's what's nice about Substack too. Like there just seems to be this real kind of resurgence of appreciation for longer form thought provocation, Although I have seen, in the notes, there's some interesting discussions that come up, where people are like hating on people for sharing progress and yeah, and like also sort of hating on the way the platform's changing, and then there's lots of people coming in. It feels like an interesting time, I imagine, for people who've been there for a while. Have you
Mhm.
noticed a change like yourself? Because you've been here like a year. How long have you been on Substack?
So I've been on Substack since the summer in 2023.
Yeah,
I only started using it seriously in like November, December time last year.
yeah,
So
that's
about a
right.
year of solid proper
Yeah,
usage. And yeah, I
yeah,
have seen it change somewhat even in that time. Like
yeah,
it's gone from being this real kind of like gold rush
mm,
almost in terms of audience growth. And
yeah,
it's kind of been tempered a little bit over the last few
yeah,
weeks and months. I think they're changing it
yeah,
slightly. Um
yeah,
but that's fine. And it just means you have to kind of
yeah,
like find new ways to connect and grow on it and that sort of thing. But
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's definitely evolving as a platform. Like I think it's gonna be very
yeah.
different in like a year's time than it is now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to see.
Yeah. So Lizzie, have you got any sort of like bigger plans for the future? So what do things look like for you over the next few years? And I also want to just while you're talking about this, tell people
Mm.
where they can connect with you online as well.
Yeah. So my Substack is called Create a Living. So maybe I'll send you a link to it so it's like easier
Yeah.
for you to link in there. But it's just createliving.substack.com. And then I am actually launching my new website within the next few days. I don't know if you can hear this. There's like a proper storm happening.
I
This
can
is
see the
a
lightning flashing outside the window,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
If that's what that
This
is.
is like Australian summer storm at its finest. It's like proper lightning and thunder. But yeah, so yeah, my new website's launching soon. So it's www.lizzie-mulherin.com, and that's going to be where all of my brand and copywriting is. And it's also going to be where you can find my course.
Mm,
So I've got another intake of the course happening next week, and then the website's launching next week. So next week's a big one.
cool.
Yeah, and then yeah, I'll be just continuing to crack on with Substack and to see where that leads. It feels like an exciting place to be, and I'm really enjoying building the community there, connecting with people there. And there's still so many things that I haven't even experimented with on the platform yet. So I'm just really excited to see where that all leads.
Yeah, the world is your oyster.
Yes.
Um, so as we finish, I always ask people this exact same question every time, and I always prompts really interesting answers.
Mm,
What is one golden nugget of advice you would give to anyone who wants to write for a living? So what's your one
yeah.
main key takeaway of advice for people?
Yeah, I would just say to write, just to start writing and keep writing. I think so often people sort of get in their heads and they'll talk themselves out of even starting because they'll tell yourself it's not possible, AI, whatever the excuses, whatever the fears are, or they'll start and then they won't hear back and then they'll stop. So just start and keep going. And I would almost like set yourself a goal of, attaching to the process rather than the outcome at the beginning. So maybe it's like for a year, you say, I'm going to write every day. And maybe that's showing up on a Substack or a Medium or, a self-publishing platform. Or maybe if you are wanting to travel write, for example, that is pitching to a publisher, a new publisher every day, or pitching to, X amount of publications a week or brands a week. There's so
Mm,
many ways that you can just cultivate and really, rather than saying I'm going to get published in this amount at the beginning, say I'm going to pitch to this amount and just
mm,
see where that leads. Because I think that is where, yeah, a lot of people sort of cut themselves short and stop themselves before they even have a chance to succeed. But if there's something in you, as I said earlier, like I really believe that if you're sitting there and you're at your job or whatever you're doing and you're just like, oh, I'm seeing people write and that's just like really catching my attention because it's something I really want to do. You really owe it to yourself to just at least give it a go because yeah, like you'll never know what the future holds. So,
mm.
but you're never like if you don't try it, nothing's ever going to happen, and then you'll just live with regret. And I would hate that for you.
Yeah. No, brilliant advice. And I love what you said there as
Yeah,
well about focusing on what you can control rather than what you can't. So focusing
yeah,
on how many publications you pitch rather than how many posts are actually published, that sort of thing.
exactly.
I think that's
Yeah,
really good solid advice as well, because I
yeah,
think sometimes we focus
yeah,
so much on things that are external to what we can actually do
exactly.
something about
Yeah,
instead of focusing on what we
exactly.
can do something about.
Focus on what you can control. Yeah, exactly. And fall in love with the process of it, like
Mm,
it is great to get the goals and to see the bylines and whatnot. But I'm going to assume that if you're wanting to be a writer professionally, it's because I hope it's because you like writing, so don't lose sight of that, and do whatever it takes to sort of hold on to that, because that's kind of where the magic is.
yeah, brilliant way to finish. Lizzie, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time. It's kind of crazy that storm that's going on behind you there right now. Now that I know what it is, it's it's kind of not so much lightning there is outside
Yeah,
your
that's
windows.
not. Yeah.
But yeah, hope you're safe anyway down in Sydney. But yeah, really appreciate your time. And yeah, everyone who's listening or watching, definitely go and check out Lizzie's publications. I'll link them in the show notes below after this, and I'll check out her website next week.
Yeah.
I think this post will be going live maybe a week after your website goes live, so it's probably a good
Perfect.
time people
Perfect.
to go
Yeah.
and join it.
Yeah.
So check
Amazing.
it out.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Lizzie, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, David.
Hey friend, thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed it, or if you enjoyed any previous episodes of the How to Write for a Living podcast, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast episodes. Don't forget you can also subscribe to my mailing list on Substack on How to Write for a Living. It'd be great to see you there as well. But definitely make sure you check out all previous episodes of the podcast, give them a listen, be well worth your time, and I'm sure you'll enjoy them. Don't forget to subscribe here and on Substack, and I will see you again really soon. Thanks for listening.